name is Clarence Edwards. I am the Legislative Director for Sustainable Energy and Environment with the Friends Committee on National Legislation. My organization advocates in Washington, D.C. for environmental protection and social justice. And I want to talk to you for the next few minutes about what me and my colleagues in Washington, D.C., who have lobbied for the past couple of years on the bill that became the Inflation Reduction Act, what we think needs to happen for the energy transition to truly succeed. In 2 words, what needs to happen is that we need to be sure that climate justice is part of this conversation. With the Inflation Reduction Act, it has $60 billion in funding for environmental justice communities in the United States. These are communities like Diamond in Louisiana, a community that sits right next to the Shell Norco petrochemical facility. When I visited Diamond back in November of 2021, the person that was driving us through the community said, "You're lucky you get to see gas flaring. They don't usually flare in the middle of the day." And I looked out the window of a van, and I don't know how tall it was, maybe a couple of stories or so. It's a flame shooting out of a pipe, flaring gas. 2 blocks away from a community, from homes. Because the definition of a frontline and fence line community. That $60 billion has to reach communities like Diamond. Because if it doesn't, and people don't feel the benefits of what we've been talking about with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's not going to be an energy transition. So I'm very proud that my organization and others have supported legislation called the Environmental Justice for All Act that will really codify and make sure that these communities can have redress when pollution impacts their neighborhoods and communities. Second point I wanted to make. 10.3 million Americans work in the oil and gas industry in this country. Oftentimes you'll hear people in these communities say that they will feel blamed for the climate crisis because they've worked in coal or they're still working in oil and gas. We have to reach out and bring those communities that are in places like North Dakota, Wyoming, and Joe Manchin's state of West Virginia. And I was listening to Bill McKibben earlier, and I totally agree with him. I don't know about Joe Manchin's motivation, but I do know that his approval numbers went up during the debate over the Inflation Reduction Act. They went up. And it's not because these people don't care about the planet burning, but 3 and 4 generations of jobs exist in these industries. So I feel like we have to extend grace, figure out how to make them part of the clean energy transition. Technology and the innovation that comes out of places like Silicon Valley makes this the greatest country in the world. The financial resources that exist in this country make it one of the strongest in the world, if not the strongest country in the world. And that leads to the third point I want to make to you today. We have to be sure to extend the benefits of the energy transition and make sure it's a just energy transition, not only for the EJ communities in places like Diamond, not only for fossil fuel communities in West Virginia, but also for people in developing countries, lower middle income countries who don't have the resources, who are burdened by debt, American debt, Chinese debt, period, that's pulling down their economies. We can't say to people in places like Pakistan, was inundated, a third of the country was underwater from storms and climate change as a force multiplier. Climate change that these countries had no hand in creating, precipitating. That old Billy Joel song said, "We didn't start the fire." I think of that every time you hear about something happening to developing countries where the weather is impacting, where the drought is magnified because of climate change. That's our doing in the West. We need to be sure that we extend to those countries the benefits that people like you all in this room work on, the technologies, the ideas, the innovation. Let's make sure that those countries benefit from it as well. Because if we don't, there isn't going to be an energy transition. I also want to note the 700, according to the International Energy Agency, 700 plus million people, predominantly in sub-Saharan Africa, have access to no energy at all. Imagine cooking your food on a wood stove. Imagine having to chop down a forest so you could cook. You know? They're not making an energy transition. They're just trying to get energy. And so we can't say to those communities and to those countries, you shouldn't develop your fossil fuel resources. What else do they have? Let's make sure that those countries and their communities benefit from this energy transition as well. You know, 20 years ago, I was a lobbyist for the One campaign started by the rock star Bono. And Bono used to always talk about the fact that when the U.S. turns its face of help and opportunity and reaches a hand to the rest of the world, that's the positive vision, that's the positive face of this country. Not just the government, but the private sector. It's like, that's what people look at when they look at America and they see what we can offer. You know, we invested a lot in programs like President's Emergency Program for AIDS relief. We'd like to see something, but I mean the coalition of people that I work with in Washington, D.C., it ranges from renewable energy companies, other faith organizations, environmental NGOs, Republicans and Democrats. That's what we want to see happen. That's what we want to see this country and people like yourselves lean into as we make this transition to clean energy. So thank you for your time and your attention, and let's move forward together.